I'm Mr. MegaManFan. This is Genesis Does, and today we are looking at TechnoCop. Last week I put out a request for viewers to suggest games I should be playing on the show, and this one was suggested by Steve Hoker. Thank you, Steve. This is a PC game that eventually got ported to Sega Genesis in 1990. It started out on the Amiga, the Amstrad CPC, the Apple II, the Atari ST, the Commodore 64, MS-DOS computers, and even the ZX Spectrum. So it had quite a life before it finally came to a console. There was also an NES version in development by Probe Software. It was going to be released by Tengen, but due to Tengen's ongoing legal problems with Nintendo, that version was ultimately scrapped, and very little of the assets in the development of it still exist to this day. Now, you start out with these driving sequences where you're just blasting down the road as fast as possible and shooting at anything that gets in your way. It doesn't really seem to matter what they are on, motorcycles, cars, trucks, whatever, just shoot them. Apparently they're all bad guys too. There are no civilians on this road because you don't get penalized for anything you shoot at. As a matter of fact, you might as well just spam the fire button and hope for the best, because if you try to shoot selectively, you end up getting bumper to bumper with the cars, and that doesn't do you much good. You might as well just blast away as fast as you can at everything you see. The game is not picky. The visuals are a little bit substandard here. Your car looks like a piece of cardboard moving back and forth across a road, and the road doesn't really have any texture either. It's just a slab of gray with white lines painted on it. It really feels like a port from an IBM PC game, because this is about the level of graphics I would have expected from a PC game when I was in my teenage years. There's no visual enhancement to this whatsoever. It's not even any illusion of parallax scrolling. You just have a range of mountains in the background and some fluffy white clouds just sitting there. Although calling them fluffy would be a stretch. They're more like squashed mushrooms. It's not a visually impressive game, that's what I'm saying. Then you have these side-scrolling missions, and some little kid is enthusiastically jumping up and down like, here, the bad guys are here. You have two different weapons. You have a gun and a net. What the point is of using one or the other, I have never figured out. We got some pseudo graffiti along the walls here like thrash and DOA rules. Dead or Alive rules? Well, it's a little too early for that game. Or maybe they were cribbing from RoboCop. I mean, it is called TechnoCop, so perhaps Dead or Alive, you're coming with me. That's what they were going for. And then the laziest graffiti of all, somebody just sprayed punk on the wall. I kind of feel like TechnoCop is a punk every time he jumps. That sound he makes is absurd. For some reason, it reminds me of Dark Castle on Macintosh, and I wouldn't call that a favorable comparison. Allegedly, you're supposed to rescue a hostage here, but I've done this mission several different times, gone up and down the elevators, explored this entire area, and I've never been able to find this grandmother that's being held hostage. All I can ever find is a woman of ill repute sitting in a chair, not even tied up or anything, just sitting there looking at you. It's not even like you get a chance to explore and figure out what you missed, because there's a timer and it runs down really, really fast. So you have to go back to your car and do another driving mission. Not that you really want to keep exploring this monotonous looking building with the same graffiti sprayed over and over again every few feet, the same cracks in the wall whether you're up or down, and these random items littered on the floor that sometimes you can crouch down and pick up and sometimes you can't. If it looks like a bag of money, you can probably pick it up. If it looks like a stereo, you can probably pick it up. If it looks like health or it looks like an item, you might not be able to pick it up. By the way, why are this guy's veins bulging in his arms so much? Is it because he's a TechnoCop, or is it because he's on more steroids than Scott Steiner and Macho Man combined? I have no idea. I don't even know what the premise of this game is supposed to be beyond you're shooting everything that you see. You're shooting everything on the road. You're shooting everything in the building. The world is full of bad guys, and there are no innocents here except the ones that you are directed to find by the mission statement you are given. And speaking of the gory content, here's an interesting little note from Wikipedia, and I quote, "Both Nintendo of America and Sega of America insisted upon previewing games made for their system prior to release to check for bugs and potentially controversial or offensive content. Sega allowed TechnoCop to be released without requiring Razorsoft to remove or tone down the game's violent content. Along with the blood, when the player character shot at another character, they would be blown apart." So why did Sega allow this? Because even I immediately noticed that that was kind of gory for a Sega Genesis game. I mean, this isn't Mortal Kombat, and you're not trying to decapitate people or remove their spines. So why they allowed that, I can't imagine. It doesn't offend me or anything, but if they had standards and they didn't adhere to their own standards, why even have standards at all? But it's possible that Sega didn't even know what they were doing at the time, because this same Wikipedia article claims it was, quote, "one of the first third-party games ever on Genesis." And if that's literally true, that means it was before Electronic Arts, Accolade, Tengen, or anybody else, which seems odd to me. It feels like there would have been an EA game on Sega Genesis before this, but I could be wrong. So I looked up a list of Electronic Arts games developed between 1983 and 1999. I found Marble Madness, which came out on most home computers in 1986, but the Genesis version didn't come out till 1991. So I guess that would put it after TechnoCop. I kept looking though, was still convinced there had to be some Electronic Arts game before this, and Zany Golf might fit the bill. It's listed as coming out in 1988. I didn't think that TechnoCop or Razorsoft were the very first third-party game. I'm not even saying Zany Golf is the first third-party game. I was like, damn it, I knew there was an Electronic Arts game on Genesis before that, because I've got a whole slew of Electronic Arts games with those weird little yellow plastic tabs in them. So if you collect Sega Genesis games for any amount of time, you're going to end up with a bunch of them too, especially loose, because you'll get a lot of Electronic Arts sports titles that are not boxed, no manual, and they don't even look like Genesis carts at first, because you're thinking that a Genesis cart should be wide and flat, and these are tall and square and have a little yellow plastic tab in them. Never even understood what the purpose of that yellow plastic tab is. Was it just so you could grip onto it when you pull it out of the cartridge port? Because other than that, I don't know. I never needed a plastic tab to pull a regular Genesis card out. You just grab and pull. It's not like they're stuck in there with glue. Anyway, I believe Steve Hoker told me that he was a fan of this game because the music reminded him of a WWF entrance song. And honestly, the music might be the best part of this game, because once you get beyond that opening sequence, everything starts to suck. Graphics are repetitive. The action, if you want to call it that, is repetitive. The sound effects are annoying. Even the limited amount of appeal of seeing somebody explode in a pile of gory chunks gets old after you shoot the first bad guy, because then you're seeing the same animation over and over again. So if it was amusing or shocking the very first time it happened, it loses that appeal immediately. There's really not much to recommend about TechnoCop. It's a basic Genesis game. It's far from the worst I've ever played. It's not Awesome Possum kicks Dr. Machino's butt. Or is it Dr. Makino's butt? I always forget. All I know is I never want to hear that guy say, "I'm awesome," ever again. Nor do I want to hear the sound that TechnoCop makes when he jumps over holes in the floor. Nor the pseudo-Wilhelm scream that he makes every time he gets injured by a bad guy. Ah! 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 No, just there's not much to recommend about TechnoCop, and it's not even a cheap game. It's $9.99 loose and $35 complete. So I don't own a copy of TechnoCop, and I'm not looking to own a copy of TechnoCop. I fired this one up in emulation because of Steve Hoker's recommendation, and now that I've played it, I can safely say this is not a game that you need to own. I'm Mr. MegaManFan, and as always, thank you for watching.